Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. It's time for some playoff predictions. We got 3 weeks left in the season. Better late than never, I thought. It's Friday night. We got a couple games tomorrow on Saturday. We have even more games Sunday and a few on Monday. It's Christmas. So what better present than a playoff prediction video? We also just hit 800 subs on the channel, so I want to thank everybody who subscribed. And if you haven't yet, please do, because we're on the road to 1,000 subs. That would be awesome if we could kick that off relatively soon. But either way, guys, I'm going to be going over the rest of the season, each team having 3 games left. We actually had 15, 16 teams to talk about, so some of them are going to be pretty quick. Thursday night, we saw the Rams beat the New Orleans Saints. So if you do watch the power rankings, you kind of know that that was my prediction. So it shouldn't affect anything that I'm kind of predicting today. Otherwise, guys, we're going to jump right into it, and I'm going to start things off by going over the AFC. We're going to talk about the teams that I think are going to miss the playoffs in the AFC, and then we'll jump into the NFC, and we'll try to complete a bracket here. First time kind of setting it up this way, but let's kick things off because it's tight. I'm just going to start things off. It's tight. Definitely in the last couple playoff spots, it's super tight on the AFC side of things. If you're 9-8, I think I have a few teams that are 9-8 that are going to miss the playoffs. One team I'm not going to put up here that I have technically in the playoff picture is the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're 7-7 right now, but I do have them winning one game at best going down the stretch. So they'll finish 8-9 and not in this conversation. But other than that, guys, we have a couple of teams here that are going to be 9-8 in my predictions. We'll start things off with Cincinnati going 9-8 down the stretch. They got Pittsburgh, Kansas City, and Cleveland. I'm just going to chuck all the teams that aren't going to be on the board. Just think they're only going to pick up one win out of these 3 games, whether it's this week against Pittsburgh. It's probably their best chance. They do finish out the season with Cleveland. That could be a potential chance for them to clinch a playoff spot and boost their record to 10-7. To me, that's their key point. I don't see them beating Kansas City. But right now, I do think they're just going to go 1-2 down the stretch. The other team, Denver Broncos, I just have them not quite getting there. They're 7-7 right now. They do technically have a pretty easy schedule. They got New England, they got the Chargers, and they end the season with the Raiders. Something tells me they're going to lose one of those games. They're going to find a way. It might even be the last week of the season. Raiders are a team that they compete pretty well against, and I think they could lose that one, but I just think they're going to lose one along the way. And if that's the case, I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. Mind you, someone can go through this, look at the tiebreakers. I might have something wrong. Tiebreakers are super hard. I didn't have time to go through all of them. So maybe I'll get the tiebreakers wrong. But it could be important because I do have the Indianapolis Colts being another team going 9-8 and missing the playoffs, guys. 9-8 is not going to be enough, but there is going to be a couple of teams in there. Actually, sorry, I have the Colts going 10-7. Sorry, I just want to fix that. Colts 10-7, and they're going to fall out short because 10-7 is going to be what I have predicted to make the playoffs. It's Colts have Atlanta, they have Las Vegas, and then they have Houston in the last week of the season. And honestly, I have Houston also finishing 10-7, but I have them sneaking in there as the 7th seed because I do think they are going to win that last game of the season, which could be the difference. Houston right now does have a little bit of advantage going. All the teams in the AFC South, I do have finishing 10-7. It's kind of crazy. I might have the tiebreakers wrong, but I think I had it right. We'll get to Jacksonville in a second, but I do have Houston finishing in 7th. Number 1 seed, I think I'm just going to get this out of the way. I have Baltimore finishing 13-4. They do have a pretty tough schedule down the stretch here. We do know that they play San Francisco this week. Very much a chance for them to lose. They have Miami next week, and then they finish out the season with Pittsburgh Steelers, which you would expect them to win. Out of those 3 games, I think they're going to win 2 of them. They might beat San Fran. They might beat Miami. I think they're going to lose one of those games, but I expect them to beat the Steelers, which would put them as the number 1 seed. The number 2 seed, I do have the Kansas City Chiefs. I think they're the only team I predicted to go 3-0 down the stretch here. Vegas, Cincinnati, and the Chargers. I just think out of those three teams, they should win them all, really. And with playoff seeding up for grabs, I think they're going to play hard throughout the whole way. And there you have it. Next up, winning the AFC East, I do have the Miami Dolphins, and believe it or not, it's probably because they just have a little bit too big of a lead over the Buffalo Bills. The Dolphins do have a very tough schedule down the stretch. Dallas, Baltimore, and ending the season with the Buffalo Bills. I expect them to pick up one win out of those three games, just one, and that will be enough for them to secure the 3 seed according to my picks. However, let's not forget, I have the Buffalo Bills, and I do have them finishing as the number 6 seed. So even though these two teams are going to be playing in Week 18, I don't think it's going to be enough. Bills going down the stretch here, they have the Chargers, they have New England, they have Miami. I do think they lose one of those games. Mind you, if they go 3-0 and Miami goes 0-3, we would see a swap here. However, I still see these guys playing each other in the first round of the playoffs, which is pretty pivotal because these guys match up very well. They're going to have this rivalry growing, and I think the Bills, with their schedule down the stretch here, they're going to be able to go 10-7, which is going to be enough to make the playoffs. I've already talked about it, though. There's a lot of 10-7 teams in my predictions, and if I have a tiebreakers wrong, we could see a little bit of a shuffle, but this is how I see it. Another 10-7 team, I do have the Jacksonville Jaguars, and they are going to be holding on to that number 4 seed in the AFC. I say holding on because they've been holding on to it all season long, but really, right now, all the teams, Houston, Indy, and Jacksonville, all 8-6. I do have them all going 2-1 down the stretch. I don't know if I have the tiebreakers perfect. Might have them wrong realistically, and if I do, we could see Houston at 4. We could see Indy at 4 if I have the tiebreaker wrong. I don't think I do, but if I do, that's the one thing. But this is how I see it. And number 5, I do have the Cleveland Browns going 11-6 as well. With the Miami Dolphins, and I think they have, again, the tiebreaker. Keep it in mind, Cleveland does have the Houston, Jets, and Cincinnati. They're one of those teams that potentially could go 3-0 down the stretch. I tried to be conservative a little bit, expecting them to go 2-1, finding a loss in there. So that's how I see the AFC East, or the AFC, finishing up in the last 3 weeks of the season. Let's move on to the NFC side. That's just a little crazy here. So we'll start by talking about the teams that are missing the playoffs. And I have 4 teams missing the playoffs here. All of them going 8-9. No, not true. We have 2 teams going 8-9. That's Green Bay Packers, the one team that's a little bit behind the 8 ball right now. They have a little bit more of a losing record than everyone else. They're 6-8. I do have them picking up 2 wins. They have Carolina, Minnesota, and Chicago. There's 2 wins in there for the Packers, but it's just going to have them a below 500 season. Not quite going to get there. Another 8-9 team. I have the Atlanta Falcons, Indy, Chicago, New Orleans. I find them only picking up 1 win in there. Atlanta just hasn't been able to be consistent enough to be a playoff team, and I think they're going to fall a little bit short. But these next 2 teams are 9-8, and keep in mind here, the last 2 seeds in the playoffs predicted and champions are also going to be 9-8. We got the New Orleans Saints, and the big pivotal game for them is going to be next week because they are playing Tampa Bay, and I think they lose that game, which will knock their chances of making the playoffs down to 0. Right now, it's very slim after losing to the Rams and the other 9-8 team, and that is an optimistic 9-8. I might add, we have the Minnesota Vikings. They got Detroit twice, and I was optimistic enough to give them 1 win in there, and then they also have Green Bay. So 3 division games easily could be 0-3 for Minnesota, which would be a 7-10, and somehow gave them 2 wins in there. 1 win is very, very possible. That's also why I have them missing the playoffs right now. So let's kick things off on this side of things. We're just going to give up the number 1 seed early. We're going to give it to San Francisco. Mind you, they are going to tie in terms of record. 13-4 is my predicting record. They got Baltimore, Washington, and the Rams. I do predict them losing 1. It might be this week against Baltimore, or it might be week 18 against the Rams. In my opinion, if they beat Baltimore, and then I expect them to beat Washington in that next week, they'll probably be resting against the Rams, and then they would likely lose in that case. If they lose to Baltimore, they'll beat Washington, and then I expect them to go all out against the Rams and pick up a win there. So either way, I kind of see the 49ers going 2-1 down the stretch and winning the NFC. The other team I do have up there at the top is the Philadelphia Eagles. We did see them struggle the past little bit. However, the schedule is in their favor down the stretch. They got the Giants twice, which is going to be just super massive, and they have Arizona. So realistically, I did predict them to go 3-0 in these games, especially with division on the line, number one seed possibly on the line. I do think the Eagles are going to close it out, which would put them as the number 2 seed. Number 3 seed, I think this one is pretty much a lock right now too. It's the Detroit Lions. Like I just touched on with Minnesota, they got 2 games against them, and they do have 1 against Dallas, so it's not the easiest schedule. I think I predicted them to win 1 of the 3 games, and that's against Minnesota. I expect kind of a prediction loss against Dallas. Mind you, they could win that one, but doesn't seem to make a difference at all in the seeding, whether they win 1 or they win 2. But I do have them going 11-6 and taking that number 3 seed, which leaves the number 4 seed, which is my NFC South prediction to win. It is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're 7-7 right now. I expect them to win at least 2 of their final 3 games. This week's probably their hardest one. They got Jacksonville, then they got New Orleans, and they get to finish out the season with Carolina, which should be a win, especially with playoffs on the line. Expect them to get in there with 9-8. They're one of the, like I said, 9-8. New Orleans is the one side that they could lose to. If they lose that, they go to 8-9, and New Orleans goes to 10-7 somehow, 10-8. Don't see that being possible actually. So Tampa Bay's got it's in their hands. Let's just say that. But next up we have number 5. It just seemed weird putting them at number 5 because they've had such a good season, but they will in theory be the 3rd best record when it comes to the NFC side of things. We got the Dallas Cowboys. It's kind of unfavorable not winning your division. You're going to be on the road in the first round. You're going to be at least the best at number 5 seed. So that is the Dallas Cowboys. They have a pretty tough schedule down the stretch here. Minnesota or Miami, Detroit, and then they get to end with Washington. Have them winning 2 of those games. And they're just going to fall 1 game short at 12-5 from Philly. So Philly's going to go 3-0. Dallas is going to go 2-1. Technically, if they both go 3-0, I think Dallas has the tiebreaker now based on the standings right now. But I do think Eagles somehow squeeze it out. That leaves us to number 6. I do have the LA Rams, guys, and I have them playing the Giants next week. And then we have them finishing it out with San Fran. I kind of already talked about how the San Fran thing will go. So really the Rams are really hoping that San Fran beats Baltimore this week so that the Rams can finish it out even stronger. I do have them being 9-8 with a 1-1 going over their next 2 games because they are 8-7 right now. Yeah, so Rams there. And then the last seed goes to another 9-8 team. So technically, if I have some of the tiebreakers wrong, don't think I do, but if I did, 9-8 is the threshold on the NFC side, and on the AFC side, we have 10-7, which apparently is the threshold. So that brings us to playoff time, and guys, I'm going to try to do this somewhat really quick. A lot going on. I don't want this video to be like 30 minutes, but we'll start with the AFC side. Number 1 seed is going to face off against the winner of the 4-5 seed. We got to remember it's like a bracket style. So we got Jacksonville versus Cleveland. Realistically, the way these 2 teams are playing right now, one team's going in one direction, one team seems to be in another direction. Cleveland always seems to step up when it really matters. So I would predict them to get past the Jacksonville Jaguars in round 1. I think it would be a really good game. Like these 2 teams, I don't think have met in the playoffs, and probably as far as I can remember, I don't think they've met. But I would see that. On this side, we have Kansas City versus Houston. I just think if Houston manages to sneak their way in there with the injuries they're dealing with, Kansas City is going to be able to handle them. We remember a couple years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, maybe even longer, Houston got out to that massive lead in the first round against Kansas City in the playoffs. Kansas City just came back. Just a wild affair. 10 we get to this game. And this one's hard to predict, honestly, right now between the Dolphins and the Bills. I know the Bills have had the Dolphins number for a while. They've been looking really good. Dolphins have yet to prove that they beat a good team. I really want to see how these next 3 weeks go before I really am forced to predict who's going to win this game. But if I had a gun to my head and I had to predict now, I would unfortunately pick the Bills to win, which absolutely crazy in my opinion. But the Bills they just have been here before. Josh Allen seems to be getting it done lately, and I'm a little more confident in that offense on the Bills side. Tua just hasn't had the battle test just yet. So we're gonna keep going. We're gonna talk about the next round, and then Kansas City Buffalo. Like it's like these two teams have played each other time and time again, and Buffalo is still waiting for that chance to pounce. And I think if they get the momentum going, they get into the playoffs, they get past Miami in round one, they're going to keep it going. They're going to roll through Kansas City into that AFC championship. And on the other side of things, I don't think it's going to be a contest between these two. I think the Ravens are pretty much going to lock it up relatively quick. Ravens are just all around a better team than the Browns. I think maybe the Browns, you could argue, have a better defense, but the Ravens have that quarterback dynamo, and the Browns are on their fourth quarterback with Flacco this season. Just don't think offensively the Browns have what it takes to take care of a team like Baltimore, and that is how you would see the final two. And this is going to be an interesting fight. If these two make it to the finals in the AFC, it's going to be super interesting because they haven't met this season, and I don't know if Buffalo's defense, given all the injuries, has any shot whatsoever. So at this point, I do predict the Baltimore Ravens to head to the Super Bowl. And let's take a look at the NFC now. Wow. 4 versus 5. Tampa Bay, should they really, if it wasn't for this division, would they really make the playoffs? I don't think it's too much to say that Dallas is going to get through, which is kind of crazy that this NFC, like the NFC seems like a weaker side, and then you get into the Final Four, and in my opinion, the Final Four of the NFC is stronger than the AFC. But you got to get to that round. Next up, we're going to have the Detroit Lions versus the LA Rams. And guys, this is absolutely crazy if this happens because it's going to be Goff versus his old team trying to make a name for himself, making it in the playoffs. The Lions haven't made the playoffs in who knows how long. Rams, youngest team in the NFL, just been on a complete roll as of late. And I'm going to have to predict that they keep it rolling. Hundo P, Rams are going to get through. Next up, we got the Eagles, Seahawks, rematch of what we just saw last week where the Seahawks drove down the field. Drew Lock getting it done for his team, keeping their playoff hopes alive. It's going to be a whole different story come playoff time, and I think the Eagles are going to absolutely step up at that time, get it done. No questions asked. I think the Eagles are the better team. We didn't see it this past week. They're going to make the adjustments. It's not going to be 2 times in a row. We've got to remember, Pete Carroll is something like 9-0 against the Eagles all time. Something to think about. Next up, we go into the next round. Dallas versus San Fran. We saw this matchup earlier in the season. San Fran just rolled Dallas. We saw Dallas get rolled by Buffalo recently. They've competed very well against the Eagles. They're one of those teams that haven't had a really consistent effort when it comes to top teams. And so for that matter, I have to predict San Fran to go on. And this is where I might get a little contrarian. This might be a little crazy. Don't shoot me, but I do actually think the Rams are going to get through past the Eagles. The Eagles just have stutter-stepped a lot. They're going to have a couple of easy games heading into the playoffs. Do expect them to go 3-0. Talked about that already. Then they're going to have a real test. The Rams are going to be ready to fight this ex-NFC championship team. I say X because they're not winning this round. Going into the finals of the NFC, I don't expect too much to be a surprise there. San Fran, I expect just roll in through here. They're going to have their third matchup playing this season. I think San Fran is going to have that 3-0, where we'll see how Week 18 goes. Week 18, they do match up, but I don't know if both teams are going to be sending out their best, especially because we talked about how San Fran's going to have it already. And then we get to the Super Bowl. I think this is the Super Bowl everyone's talking about. It's especially the one they're talking about when they look at the colors of the logo. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but apparently that predicts who the Super Bowl is going to be. It's got to be red. It's got to be purple. Don't see the Vikings on this side, so it can't be Chiefs versus Vikings. So this seems to be what it's going to be, and that's starting to line up relatively closely. So there you guys have it. The predictions of the playoffs with 3 weeks left in the season. Let me know what you guys think. Subscribe to the channel, all that fun stuff. And don't you think I wasn't going to predict who's going to win the Super Bowl, guys? At this point in time, I am actually leaning San Francisco. It's just one of those things right there at the very final. I just have to go with my gut. I think both these teams are very capable. I do think San Francisco just has that slight edge when it comes to defense and on the defensive ends and the defensive rush and just putting a little bit of pressure on Lamar. But they haven't seen a guy like Lamar before, so very well could surprise them. But with him, McCaffrey, they have the weapons on the wide receiver. I just think they're the most well-rounded team in the entire NFL. So I'd be heartbroken not to predict them to win it all. There you guys have it. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel, like the video. We will see you guys next week for the updated power rankings. Peace out.